All right, let's go back, deal with the links. So if you remember, we called them nav item, and the way you call a class and style it is dot nav item. I'm going to give it some margin left, 25 pixels. Whoops. Then float left and margin top 20 pixels. Save that. All right, great. That's actually exactly how we wanted it to look. Let's pull up our mockup real quick. Okay. All right, so we have our logo and we have our links. All right, great. Now let's start working on the home page. So for the home page, we see that we need the Jumbotron over here. So that's the first thing we're going to add. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll navigate over. So we're going to go to this views under pages directory, home.html.erb. And we currently have hello world over here. I'm going to go ahead and remove that. And then let's give it div class Jumbotron. Actually, I'm also going to give it a class of center. So the way you give it two classes is you enter one and then you put a space and you enter the second one. Welcome to my recipes app. And then we want some info about the app, so I'll put that in H2. This is the home page for the professional Ruby on Rails developer course on Udemy. All right, and then we want a link. So we're going to open Ruby tag, embeds a link to sign up now. So since we don't have a sign up link yet, which we'll create later, we're going to leave it as an empty link. I'm going to give it a class, button large, button success. Close our tag. Okay. Let's see what that looks like. All right, great. So we have this Jumbotron in here. Well, but see how it's extending all the way over here? We need to put this in a container. Remember when we were doing the nav bar, we put the code in a container and it gave some spacing and it looks nice. Over here, we don't have that. So we're gonna go back. Instead of putting it here, we're gonna go to the application HTML ERB file, and yield is where it's showing up. So I'll just put div class container over here. All right, much better. Okay, now let's add some styling to the H1 tag, the H2 tag. So where do we add the styling? We go to our custom.css.scss page again. Remember we gave Jumbotron a center, so center class, so we'll do that first. And then we're just going to align the text. Text align, and then center. Okay. Then H1 tag, H2, H3, H4. I don't think we'll need H5, H6. So line height 1. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, much better. All right, so now let's do them individually. So for H1, this looks ugly. Font size 3 EM. Letter spacing -2 pixel. Margin bottom 30 pixel. Text align center. So anytime you have a H1 tag, the text is always going to be aligned to center. H2. Font size 1.2 EM. Margin bottom 30 pixels. Text align center. Font weight normal. Color All right, let's see what that looks like. Okay, great, much better. All right, I wanted a little more space here, so I don't know what I did wrong. Let me see if oh, whoops, this is supposed to be 30 pixels. Let's try that again. Okay, great, much better. All right, so I'm going to pull up the mockup again just to reference how we had thought about this page. All right, so now we're going to add this. This will be a little quicker because we're just going to copy this one. We're going to create this once and then copy over a couple of times. And then the last thing we'll do is the footer. All right, so let's go back. We'll go back to the home page. We're going to do div class row. Now, if you're thinking what div class row does, basically it will arrange for these three to be in the same row. And Bootstrap uses the grid system, and there are 12. If you think of them as columns, you'll have like 12 columns. So we're gonna give each of these like 4 columns. So total will be 12. Okay. If you want to read up about the grid system, and I encourage you to do so, just check out getbootstrap.com. All right. So div class row, div class equals call LG, so large, and then 4, like we had said. And then we're going to do H3 class mid row, view recipes as guest user. All right. Then we're going to do H2 class left, and then browse and view recipes as a guest and sign up later. Okay, then we want to add a link. So we're gonna link this to browse recipe listings. We will create the link later, so at this time we'll leave it open, and then we're going to give it a class. Button warning, button small. Okay, close our Ruby tag. All right, let's see what that looks like. Okay, great. Let's copy this over. I don't like where this is showing up from. Let me see what I did wrong here. Oh, I haven't defined the class left. All right, let me go ahead and do that real quick. Actually, I'll do that later. Let me just copy this over a couple of times. All right. All right, great. Now let's move these to the left. And we're going to do that by referencing the left class. So in custom CSS SCSS at the bottom, just do dot left and text align left. And give it some letter spacing, 0.5 pixel. All right, much better. All right, so now the last thing is the footer. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. So where do we want the footer code to be? Again, since it's going to be pretty much in all our pages, we want to start off by putting it in the application.html.erb page. So right under yield, let's give it div class footer. And copy semicolon. So what this does, this symbol, it basically gives you that copyright symbol in the page. My recipes 2015. Save this. All right, it shows up, but I want to separate this, so I want a line. So I'm gonna add some styling to this. If you go back to custom CSS SCSS, and you know that we have a class of footer, so I'm gonna call it here footer, and I'll give it some margin top. 25 pixels, and I'll give it a border top. I'll give 1 pixel, and I'm going to give it a color, so solid, and then say EA. You can pick any color that you choose. Color for the text. Okay, that looks perfect. All right. So if you've been following along, congratulations, because you've just completed the homepage for your app. Now, I encourage you to play around with this, the styling, and if you want to create your own, feel free to do so. Just make sure you have the links because we're going to make use of them later on. But in terms of styling, I encourage you to go look at Bootstrap and see what works for you. If you want to use this one, feel free to do so. You know, if you've been following along, you've done great so far. Now, in the next lesson, we'll introduce you to partials. Right? So here, if you look at our application HTML ERB, starting to look a little cluttered. We want this file to be fairly clean. So what we're going to do is we're going to introduce partials and we're going to extract this code for the nav bar into a navigation partial. All right? And also another thing I want to do real quick before the next lesson is I want to initialize our Git repository. Now we already have a completed homepage with a route controller and now a view. So we need to do this now. Usually you want to initialize the repository as soon as you get started and create a new Rails app. We diverted from that norm, and but that's okay because we're not too far in. So let's go to the command line over here to this terminal. Okay. Make sure you're in the workspace app. Now, one thing I would say, if you're working locally, you're fine. But for Cloud 9, we're going to have to add a line to our git ignore file. All right. Now, if you look here, you don't see a .git ignore file because it's a system file. All right. If you go ls here, you won't see it. But if you go ls-a, then you'll see this file .gitignore. All right. So let's pull that up. How do we see it here to pull it up? Over here in the widget, click on it and click on show hidden files. All right, and it shows all the hidden files. We're just interested under workspace in this .gitignore. So pull that up and add this line to it. Okay. There's a comment here, ignore all Cloud 9 and hidden files, and then do .c9/. What this will do is it'll ignore all of the Cloud 9 specific files. Okay, so Git won't track those, all right? You see this folder here, .c9, this is Cloud 9 specific, and we don't want to track those, okay? Once you've added that, save this file, and then we don't want to see all of these system files, so we're gonna get rid of that link again. All right, so now let's go ahead and create our Git repository. I'm going to close out this gitignore file also. All right, so you do that by first typing in git init. So initialize the empty Git repository. That's great. Now type in git add-a. This will basically start tracking all of our files under our workspace app. It'll be in whichever folder you're in. So since we're in the workspace app, we do that. All right. Now, if you do git status, you'll see all of these files are now staged and ready to be added. Already added, but ready to be committed. So let's go ahead and do our first commit. So type in git commit -m for a message, and let's say initialize repo and build homepage. Okay, and then hit enter. All right, great. Now type in git status. It says on branch master, nothing to commit. Everything looks good. All right, so that's great, and everything's all set. So I'll see you in the next lesson.